Canada's provinces continue to reveal the damage global uncertainty is doing to their finances. Today, we're zooming in on Quebec. On Wednesday, it revealed a deficit that was lower than expected, but it was still $8.6 billion. In the budgets we've seen across Canada so far, not a single province or territory has stayed out of the red, and Quebec is one of just a handful with plans to balance the budget this decade. But could U.S. tariffs and war in the Middle East derail those plans? Joining me now, Girard is Quebec's finance minister. Nice to see you, sir. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
So there's a provincial election later this year in your province, and if we're to believe the polls, your party trails the Parti Québécois and the provincial Liberals. Yet this budget doesn't include many goodies. You know, there aren't many big-ticket items that you might expect to see in a pre-electoral budget like this. It's more modest than some had expected. What's your strategy here, Minister?
We're in the middle of a leadership race, and once we have a new leader, we'll be competitive and offering to Quebecers a competitive option for next election. And so the strategy is to be responsible, keep some powder dry, because this is really an unstable, uncertain environment with the key element of uncertainty is the CUSMA review, but of course there is the war in the Middle East right now that's causing additional uncertainty. So we're keeping the path toward balanced budget. We're funding adequately the mission of the state, healthcare, education, increasing infrastructure moderately, keeping our plan to go back to balance. So it's really a responsible budget. A few targeted measures for emergencies like homelessness and food banks and domestic violence, but overall sober, really responsible.
I want to get to CUSMA in a second. Let's talk about that Middle East conflict, because I want to know what sort of impact it's going to have on your province's finances and the economy writ large. Obviously, some provinces in the federal government stand to gain, frankly, from higher oil and gas prices. Quebec is not one of them. You are a net oil importer, of course, and that could squeeze consumers and businesses in your province. So what's your strategy for dealing with this turmoil in the energy markets?
Well, it's really difficult to evaluate the impact because we don't know the duration of the conflict and the geographical dispersion of the conflict. And so what we did in the budget is we took an assumption that the conflict was going to last for 6 weeks and that the average price was going to be, the WTI was going to be at $90 for the 6-week period. And of course, we're already in the 3rd week of this conflict. And so we're a net importer of energy, and like every other jurisdiction in the world, we want the Strait of Hormuz to open, and we'll have to wait. But if one thing that I've learned working for 24 years in financial market is you really need to have a cool head and be calm when everybody's excited and nervous. And so we have a wait-and-see attitude right now with respect to the conflict.
How'd you come up with 6 weeks for those higher gas prices? Is it essentially just a guess, really?
We're looking at the term structure on the NYMEX exchange, and we're seeing that a year from now, the price of the oil future contract is $30 lower than the current, for example, $95. We're at I believe $73 a year from now. So we just made an assumption. This is what economists are doing. We assume that the Strait of Hormuz could not be closed for a full 2-month period without having too severe consequences. And of course, when you say that some provinces are benefiting from being net exporter, there are a lot of non-linearities with this. I think we can live with great difficulties with a $90 barrel of oil. We will have a global recession if we stay for too long at around $150, for example. Yeah. So there's a point where we're all worse off because we're in a global recession.
The federal carbon tax is gone, of course, because Prime Minister Mark Carney scrapped that, but the provincial cap-and-trade system remains in place. The Petits Québécois were asking for some sort of gas tax relief in this budget, but that didn't come together. You're sticking to your guns, no change. Tell me why.
Yeah. So the carbon tax or the carbon exchange is adding 8 cents to the liter of gas in Quebec. Well, because the fundamental problem is the war in Iran and the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. So if on Friday today I'm removing the 8 cents of the carbon exchange and the Strait of Hormuz reopen a week from now, I'm just adding volatility. So what we're doing right now is we have an analytical wait-and-see attitude, and if we need, because the conflict persists, to provide cost of living support to Quebecers, then we would choose the right vehicle to do this, and it would not necessarily be the carbon tax.
You talked about CUSMA off the top. Of course, that's hanging over the entire Canadian economy, the review of the Canada-US-Mexico agreement. Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe told me he's worried, frankly, about the lack of progress in securing a deal with the Americans. The U.S. has been negotiating with Mexico this week, but there's no word on when the federal government will get some more face time with those folks in Washington. What's your message to Ottawa? How important is it that we get this review done quickly?
Well, the review is really the focus is July 26, and so my message to the federal government is I'm not asking them to talk more. I want them to sit down and negotiate and get a good deal for Quebec and Canada. So I'm not asking for anything in particular. I'm waiting to see results. There is no justification for 50% tariff on aluminum. Take, for example, Alcoa, a U.S. company, is producing aluminum in Quebec, shipping it to Pittsburgh, transforming it, and selling it all over the world. It doesn't make any sense to tariff Alcoa to produce aluminum in Quebec. So I'm looking for results and not too concerned about what is being said and where.
Your budget actually assumes that the tariffs on Canadian goods will be around for the long haul. You know, that doesn't necessarily signal a lot of optimism on your part. Why do you expect the tariffs to remain in place?
Well, we're assuming that the average tariff that we have now will be there, but obviously the 50% on aluminum and 46% on softwood lumber is unacceptable to Quebec. And so if the average tariff is in the neighborhood of 3 to 5% and it applies to a broader set of goods, we could probably live with that. But right now, the 50% on aluminum and 46% on softwood lumber is unacceptable.
All right, let's leave it there. Quebec's Finance Minister, Girard, nice to see you, sir. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.